Please, Dr. Kadri, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you for the invite, and I'm happy to speak to your group. And I'm going to speak, as I said, about this notion, this last book of mine, which is called Waste Accumulation. And it really touches on the environment, but it's not about the environment per se. It is more about humans and thinking of humans as part of the environment. When we have humans and we have nature, because we shouldn't be separating the two too much from each other, because humans are also nature. And as much as we destroy nature in the process of accumulation, we also destroy humans. And the emphasis on the natural destruction alone is worthwhile. It's not, but the emphasis on the natural destruction alone tends to leave the destruction of man on the wayside, tends to leave the wars, the poverty, the death from austerity, the death from pollution, and the death from unwanted disease also somewhat neglected. So I'm going to start by giving you an empirical picture, And in this empirical picture, I'm not going to give many numbers. I'm going to give an image of what is out there, a number that we all know already, that we all heard about. For instance, in all the studies on how badly the environment has been injured and what will happen in the next 20, 30 or 40 years, how temperatures will rise and how there is a possibility that a natural disequilibrium will kick in. And if it kicks in, then, instead of having the gradual rise in temperature or the gradual erosion of the natural habitat, we will have an immense problem to deal with that is unprecedented or unexpected. And therefore, so the picture itself is quite grim. Now, what this calls to mind is that where we stand today, from where we stand today, we have accumulated way too many pollutants. I mean, the plastics in the sea and in the air and in the grounds and so forth, way too many pollutants. And these pollutants are the social products of labor, of work. When we produce pollutants, when I produce a pen, for instance, this pen, I produce the pen, but I produce pollutants before and after. It needs to be disposed of, and so there are pollutants before, from the mines, from the energy sectors, and so on, and pollutants after the disposal and the damage to nature that these things will. So the empirical point I want to make is that we have accumulated, if we are saying that we are going to be in a very detrimental situation in the next few years or in the next few decades, then we must have accumulated way more pollutants. We must have produced way more pollutants than useful goods, than goods that are of use to society. And if we have produced way more pollutants than what is useful to society, that means we have created a machine in the death of the environment. We have created in the dead environment, in the sickened nature, in the nature that has been polluted, a machine that actually acts to destroy humans as well. So we, in the process of making a pen, we went to Africa or to the Arab world and got the oil and got the copper and got whatever. For that, I mean, this is one facet. This is much more complicated than this. But we had, negotiated with the people over, because there are no lands without peoples, right? If we, no resources without peoples. If we're saying, if we have a resource somewhere, there must be people living over the ground. And there is and people and nature are in oneness, what we call social nature. People are subjects over this process because they think they are conscious. Things are not conscious. And we negotiate with people. Give us your copper, give us your oil, or give us your something. And people will have to say, no, we want a higher price because they, probably for some reason, they value their labor more or something of this nature. And we then have a war against these people to extract whatever we need at cheap prices. And this is necessary. It's necessary because the simplest law under capitalism is the law of profit. If I need to sell this and make a profit out of it, I need to reduce the cost and be competitive. So the reduction of the cost means the reduction of the will of the people that sit atop the resources that I am going to extract and so that they are weak. When I negotiate with them, I can get whatever resources they have for very cheap prices. So this is the law of profit. The law of profit involves cost minimization, and cost minimization involves life minimization, natural life minimization, reduction, and human life reduction. But I can't get the resource unless I cannot extract the resource unless I extract some human lives. So the name, the extractive industries, the oil is an extractive industry, misses the point that what needs to be extracted first is the life of the human who lives above the oil, or the life of the human who lives above the copper, whichever resource we are talking about. And this is something that is, this totality, this picture is something that is missing in the analysis. And I will continue to say that now that I have, that I am, I'm cost minimizing, and so on. And everybody's doing that. Everybody around the world, all the corporations, since the onset of capitalism in the 1500s, the production relations have changed. We no longer produce things for use, we produce things to sell. So the use part of the equation is really of minimal concern or of no concern at all. What matters is I am going to make things to sell. And even if those things result in the death of many abroad, the important things is that I have a market to sell these things, these finished products to. And in the process as well, this process of destruction and extraction of life in the developing nations, what happens is something goes missing often in the discussion, is that people tend to think that developed nations are somewhat inherently better than more educated, they have better technology and so on. So they reify the technology of the developed nation. They make the thing, which is the machine, a subject of history. And that's not possible. Things don't do things. It takes humans organized in social relations and in institutions that do things. So the reason why there is technology and there are many resources in the North, it is because you keep on destroying the developing nation. You enslave them, you genocide them, you continue with wars of aggression of all sorts, colonization, then imperialism, then genocide of colonialism, and all of these things. So there is no time for resources to grow in the developing world. All the resources and all the knowledge and everything of worth will fly to the North. So the reason why everything centers to the North is not because of some sui generis component in the North that makes it better than the South, it is because the South is systemically and systematically being destroyed by the North. So, so it is not the machine, it is the relationship of destruction of the South that is the cause of the development of and the concentration of the productive forces in the North. That's something of an aside, but it's very important because people sometimes don't think historically. They say, well, look, they have better machines, but they have better machines not because they are more gifted than the others. They have better machines because there is no way for science to be adapted into technology anywhere else in the world but in the North, because the South is being systematically destroyed by the North. Now I go back to the principle, to the point that I've said earlier. The point that I have said earlier is that I have an empirical situation which doesn't need much proof. My empirical situation is, if the world is going to basically nearly perish in 60 or 70 years' time, that means I have produced over time, that is produced time and again, so many pollutants, so much premature death of nature. And it sits with us. We are a closed social metabolic system. We are a closed system. The planet is a closed system. It's not going to go to another planet, the pollutants we made with our labor and effort. It's going to stay here. And over time, we will consume it and we will pay for it. And we are paying for it as we speak, because it causes illnesses, for instance. And if it causes illnesses, we are paying for these illnesses in the hospitals and elsewhere and so on and so forth. All you have to do is live in a developing world city to realize that the level of pollution is a health hazard. And also an offshoot of this situation, that if I am in pursuit of profits, I am capital, and I am in pursuit of profits, and I want to make so much in profits, then I need to cut costs, as I said. Now, cutting costs is also not just a matter. I don't cut costs because I go to the store of inputs. I have a mall with labor and machines, and I walk in and I say I need 10 machines and 10 workers, and I pay for them. That's not how costs are cut. Costs are cut because the people that own resources, that own labor and own resources, must be crushed into accepting whatever terms I have to impose on them. And this is a phenomenal condition. Now, if I need to cut costs, I also need to make sure that over a long time, the real time of society is not the time of capital. It's not the quarterly profits or the yearly GDP or the time that capital imposes on us. It is not that. The real time of capital is the real time of society is the time in which society is born, lives and dies and regenerates itself. That's the real time. It's the longer time. And in that time, in the real time of life, we consume all we produce. If I throw this in the lake, no matter how small it is now, we as a society will be consuming the water, and from that lake, which is going to be tainted with the elements that are found in this in the inorganic matter of this plant. So the idea is we live in a closed system, and this social metabolic order, because we are a society that reproduces itself. We consume inputs and we produce things, and then we consume the things we produce, and we are producing too many pollutants, too much of the death of nature. And that death of nature that we have produced acts like, because it's a product of capital, it is a commodity. It has a price to it. A commodity is not something we just use. It is something that has a price to it. So pollutants have a price to it. Guns have price to them. Some people like guns. Most people don't like pollutants, but they consume pollutants and they pay for them. And so the idea of free will and I pay for the, this, that doesn't enter into the conversation now. It enters into the conversation when there is the sort of revolutionary consciousness that's going to twist things around to change the social order in which we live. And so so for now, the point I want to get at, if I am going to reduce cost by making, in order to make profits, and if the pollution that I create then acts as a machine that I have created that is going to shorten the life of society or the life of workers, and it's going to make them pay more during a shorter life for things that weren't monetized before, like pollution, then I, as a profiteer, as someone who wants to make profit, I have an interest in destroying nature more and more. So the destruction of nature causes the destruction of man, and this cycle, I destroy nature and nature destroys humans, and I make more money out of this situations. So that's the cycle we are locked into. So the profit now, if I'm going to speak about the rate of profit, what am I going to say? I'm going to say the rate of profit is going to be corresponding or be proportional to the rate of destruction of nature and man. You see, the rate of profit is usually how much capital I have relative to how much output I have. I have 10 machines which cost $10 and they produced $100. So 10 over 100 is 10%. That's my rate of profit. That's how it is measured in money terms. But the rate of profit in real terms, that's in money terms. Money is just a symbol that somebody with so much power that has created and made it into a social convention that is consensually accepted to act as a medium of exchange and an image of value. But it is a distorted image of value. The real image of value is what it takes to make us live better lives. That's what should be of worth, not the money that and the national accounts that a capitalist has created to when he owns time and space, when he has control over time and space. When capitalism not only has control over space, but has control over time as well. Because it has control over time because the rate of profit keeps on, all rates would, all systems over time, they run into hurdles, and rates start to decline. The rate is the speed of acceleration. It starts to decline. The rate of profit would start to decline. Then I have to reboost the rate of profit. And how do I rejuvenate the rate of profit? Well, I have to basically destroy more and more of nature and more of man, and reduce the costs. So what we have is a cycle that is auto-reinforcing, that involves control over space, control over time, and control over the mind of man as well. And in this cycle that in this reproductive cycle that we have, a social reproductive cycle, what we end up having is a system that grows more and more by destruction. The more destruction there is, the more profit there will be. This is not a sort of like lagged relationship or something that you can mimic in money terms, because money, again, is a symbol that power imposes upon the minds of man as a social convention. So when the power that imposes, the power of capital, that is class power, that imposes its money form, like the dollar over the universe, over the globe altogether, it imposes that because it has considerable power to make people use its currency, admit that this consent to that currency as value, as something of value, and so on. So this consent that is not based on some rational understanding of the situation, the global situation. This consent is generated by the use of force, by the use of brute force, military bases everywhere around the world, wars, the idea that many nations could be decapitated, could be destroyed in 1 second. All of this is part and parcel of it. But the point I want to drive through is that when capital destroys nature, it destroys nature to destroy man, and the destruction of man and nature, which together we call social nature, because man is nature as well, but man is nature with consciousness, then this combination, this destruction of nature, is what is going to generate a positive rate of profit. So the idea then that we can recycle to treat capitalism is not a possibility, because what we have is a competitive process in a two-tiered system, a south and a north, and a south which must be structurally comprised of a higher rate of destruction than the north. The north can protect itself relatively from a process of global degeneration, global auto-destruction. It will be destroyed at a lower rate than the south, but the south must be destroyed always at a higher rate in order to cut costs and for the corporations that sell things to be competitive in the north, and so on and so forth. So it is recycling in that sense is not going to work. Why wouldn't recycling work? I mean, it does. It's like a band-aid. It's not going to, because if there is there are no profits in recycling. It is a social cost to capital. It is a cost to society. It's a social cost, and there are no profits from it. So, of course, capital shifts. It makes more profits if it shifts its cost to the global south. The more the costs of production are centered around the destruction of the cost of destruction in the global south, the more capital will be freed to sell at prices that generate higher profits. What do I mean by this? With an example, let's say I go into a store to buy this pen, and I buy it for $10, and it had cost $5 to produce, and so I would say the profit rate is $5 in this case, right? But in actual fact, the real cost of that pen is is much more than $5. The real cost of that pen is the cost of this destruction to nature that capital has not paid to. It's the cost of the destruction to labor. It has paid, very low wages to labor, below subsistence, that destroyed also the social environment. So we have a destruction of the economic environment and a destruction of the social environment and the natural environment. And all these costs that capital should bear in order to One, because it has decided on the production of that pen, was borne by society. So the more costs are borne by society, the more profit capital makes, because it has less, it takes upon itself less cost. It shifts the cost of production to society and nature rather than onto itself. And as such, if we count the real cost to this pen, the cost to, the cost of pollutants and the cost, it would be probably $100 in cost. So that pen should sell for 110, but it's selling for $10 in the case, and it's made in such a way that it doesn't last too long, and it has to be thrown away in order to regenerate the cycle and all that. So and so we have a situation where the rate of destruction of nature defines the rate of profit. The rate at which the costs to society rise also define the rate of profit. And in this cycle, if we consider the issues like recycling, for instance, it's no longer profitable for capital to recycle. That's why the state usually carries on the cost of this, and the cost of recycling should be carried by capital. But of course, recycling is a necessary component of a healthier social life. But it doesn't occur. It couldn't occur under capital, and so the point one further makes is that wars, in a sense, wars are huge environmental disasters. Wars are also necessary for production, for cutting costs, because wars emaciate whole nations, emaciate whole societies. They become incapable of negotiating the value, the price of their resources. And wars are also a form, an industry, because wars also involve a migration of labor to the south. So you have northern soldiers migrating to Libya or to Africa or to somewhere in the south. And so there is migration. Migration to the north doesn't occur only because it's not the only route for migration. There is always a forerunner, a migration of the northern labor, army labor, to the south, army and NGO labor, because the NGOs of the north are also an ideological army of capital. They go to the south in order to pollute the environment with ideas that basically foment the auto-destruction of these societies as the only rational alternative available to them. And so the NGOs and the armies of the north are waged labor that produce the death of the south. And the death of the south is whenever spending on NGOs or spending on wars. Wars, for instance, are obviously an industry, because we hire somebody and we give him a tank or a fighter jet, which is a machine that is going to produce death. And at the same time, this is financed by treasury bills, and treasury bills earn rents. So when there are corporations or huge financial institutions that buy the treasury bills, they earn rents on a process of accumulation, an industrial process whose principal product is the death of man and nature. So there is a royalty that accrues to financial institutions from the production of the death of nature and man. And this is a an industrial process. Wars kill, modern wars are about industrial scale killing. If we go back just to the last century, in some estimates, 500 million people died because of wars and issues, associated with wars. And between 1900 and 1500 and 1900, some estimates say that 400 million people at the time, out of a population which never grew above 1 billion people, have perished as a result of colonial wars and so on, slavery and genocides. So wars are a profiteering domain, but they are also the more essential domain to capital accumulation, because they're the ultimate form of destruction. They are an industry of mass killing, and so the idea is that there is if I'm going to produce anything, because there are stages in the production of a computer, of a pen, of a speaker, of a microphone, whatever we are producing, there are stages in production. If we start at the various stages, it's like an onion with many layers until we get to the final process of the pen. But at the heart of the onion, there has to be. Without war, nothing will happen. There is no way that without force and brutality, any process of production will take place. War is necessary. Why? Because war, again, it is an industry in its own right, because it produces royalties to the financier worth. But it also decimates the populations of the developing world and the nature of the developing world. And this decimation of the social nature of the developing world shifts the power balances in favor of the victors, in favor of capital. And when the power balances shift in favor of capital, then capital can foist its symbols, its dollars, its knowledge symbols, its name symbols, like when you say the Mayo Clinic or Harvard or the US dollar or the German Mercedes or the BMW, all these name things, they gain an aura of holiness around them, such that people think that that they are unrelated to the death that has occurred in the developing world, that they are somewhat, a great thing in their own right, but they are symbols of power, and the power that governs the development of the planet is Western power, because it's and headed by the United States. This Western power and headed by the United States governs the planet. Now, if we are saying, let's just be clear about the obvious here. If we say that the planet is going to perish in 60 or 70 years or something, and we have produced so much death, and we will be producing more death, then the power that governs the world is actually a death power. It is not a benign, it is not something, I mean, you see, it's Western civilization. It's not Western and Eastern. There is no such thing. These are polar lines of demarcation, but the lines of demarcation are class lines. So you can have North and the South, and south in the north and south in the north, whatever, because the class lines, the minorities in the United States, which are without papers or in France or something like that, they were part of the southern class formation. They are not different from the southern class formation. So one uses those north-south not in the geographic sense, but in the class formation sense. Well, so when we say Western civilization, we mean the civilization of capital, which actually has a lot of people from the, a lot of comprador bourgeois from the south in cahoots with the north that produce these things. Because there is alliances, cross-sectional alliance across class lines. So when we say that we have produced, when we say we have a civilization, what is there to show for us? What is a civilization? By the simplest definition, it is the mounds of material wealth and the mounds of spiritual wealth, right? And if we look at the material wealth of the planet, we know that there is more death and disease, death of nature and pollution, than anything good we have produced. So there is nothing to write home about when we say we are progressive and we are Western civilization and our democracy is better. This democracy kills. It's killing the planet, because it is this idea of the democracy, of course, is a form of the exercise of political power, and in that sense, this democracy is part of the arsenal, the ideological arsenal of capital, which is the ideas of capital, the ideology of capital, which governs. So my ideas govern such that I make more profits. And I make more profits by the rate of destruction. So the rate of destruction is my rate of profit. And destruction means the destruction of nature, destruction of man, and primarily through war. And NGOs help a lot, because they go into the developing world and they say that we come from the best universities and we know what's good for you, while in a sense while saying to the rest of the developing world, look, you are doing so badly because you don't have this and that. But if you look at the history of the developing world, there isn't a place that is bereft or has escaped the massacre of Western colonial capital and Western imperialist capital. It is impossible. You will be hard pressed to find any place in the world that hasn't experienced death at the hand of Europe in history. It is impossible. So, what you have is a civilization of capital, and a civilization of capital which is a civilization of death. If the planet is going to die in 50 years' time, we have a lot of death accumulated so far. We know how much there is. So there is no material wealth to speak about. And there is no spiritual wealth, because if the spiritual wealth, the dominant ideas that produce the death, are the one must tally with this. These universities are not going to produce something which is of benefits to humanity. When they speak of recycling, that's just a retouche to make some people with a conscience in the Western Hemisphere, from the middle classes of the Western Hemisphere, feel that they are doing something at the individual level to better their life circumstances. But this has practically zilch effects on the global, on a system that has to destroy the South, such that the northern profit strains grow. And that's the situation that we're in. And that situation is very simple. I mean, I haven't theorized. I have just been describing what is happening. Theorizing means to explain what laws carry the development from one state of affairs to the next. What law will, we were a planet which wasn't so badly, 1 second, I think I don't have a light here. we were a planet that was not so bad in terms of the way nature was. Prior to capitalism, you didn't have to. There were no ontological laws of development that says, I must destroy man because I'm going to take what he has and sell it somewhere else. When in a pre-capitalist system, it was natural. It has low technology. Everybody died at an early age of 30 or something, depending, and invading empires usually had to restore irrigation system and make sure that the peasant or the slave lived a long time. Because you need him to work for a longer period of time, because you produce so little with the technology that you have, and you have a crisis of underproduction and a crisis of underconsumption. Under capitalism, you no longer need man. You can destroy man because in every area of production you have a crisis of overproduction. You are competing with few other guys who are blind about the conditions of the market, and they produce too much of everything relative to the market that they are selling to. But in some markets we produce absolutely too much, like the food market, the basic food market. We produce too much. We produce for 12 billion people, yet we have hungry people. But in general, under capitalism, the crisis of overproduction necessitates, by necessity that is, a crisis of underconsumption. We must produce a lot, and we must make sure that some don't eat. Why? Because if they don't eat, we don't have to spend on them, and if we don't spend on them, we have more profits. And so, shorter lifespan, and more that monetizes things, commodifies things that weren't commodified before. That is, prices them and consumes them, like pollutants. They weren't monetized. They weren't there before. Now they are, but they must have been there before, but we've just seen them. We were paying for them before, but we haven't seen. The price system is all pervasive. In the 40s and 50s, it doesn't mean we weren't paying for the pollution that we are producing. We were paying for it in the medical bills. But now it's such a grandiose problem that we are saying it's everywhere. We are paying for it. But what this says is the price system, the commodification under capitalism is everywhere. Anything you produce is a commodity. And every commodity has a price. It must be consumed over time. And if it has a price and it must be consumed over time, if that price follows the life of the commodity, follows its creation, it's associated with it, and it's interlocked with the other price, with the overall price system, and a price system which is interdependent on each other, because if I need to cut costs there, I'm going to raise prices here and make a profit here. That interdependence it's like a quantum field, the price system. It is there all the time and almost outside of space and time. In that world, we have been paying always for everything we've produced, but we didn't see it. Like we pay for mothers that sit at home. We think we don't pay for them, but we pay for them. Sometimes we pay them negative prices. We pay them so little that they die indebted at a very young age in the developing world. And the idea, moreover, it's a very important point, because often it is said that that capitalism has brought a longer life span. Capitalism has brought a longer span of life. The point is, this is a misnomer. It can't be measured. When we say that we live longer now relative to 1600 or to 1000 or to 500 BC, that is meaningless, because time is qualitative. I cannot compare a point in time with a previous point in time. at any point in time, or any point in time. It has to be taken with a considerable dose of arbitrary decision making. It cannot happen. So when the fascist right in Europe and in the United States says that it's okay for Africans and Arabs, they shouldn't complain because they were living only to 20 or 30 years, now they're living to 50. That's a very racist statement. First of all, it's wrong because you cannot compare. In 1500, everybody was living to 30 years old. As the average life expectancy was something like 29 or 30 years old, or 40, whatever, right? But now everybody could live to 90 because we overproduce everything, and everything is so cheap. If we want to make it, if we want to distribute it based on social criteria. But we make them live to 50 because they would cost less if they lived only to 50. They would cost less over the cost of their social reproduction cycle. And that's what matters, because the social cost of the reproduction is the real value. You see? So the whole thing, the whole idea of focusing on pollutants only, when pollutants are not an unwanted something, they are not an unwanted consequence of some action. There is no such thing as unwanted in history. History is not a person to want, or history is impersonal and objective. We are all born into history. And history is, what is it? It is the set of social relations and the cultures and the institutions we are born into, and they tell us. And it sort of puppeteers us. It manages us in one way or another until, of course, if we get together and make it change. But it manages. It's history. We are born into history. We are products of history and born into history. And as such, it is important to record that to take a different course of action, there must be a complete overhaul, a complete rejection of the system of private property. Because it's a system of capital is based on a system of private property. What is capital? It is, society produced this, but it is mine. I bought the labor of society, the private labor of society becomes social labor, and it's mine. And what is private property? Private property is, I own this and it's not yours. That's private property. So the private property relation and the capital relations are two facets of the same coin. And you can't have a system run on this, because it's a system of destruction. It's a system of systemic destruction. It's systemic because the laws of capital, all the laws of surplus value, the law of value, the law of profit, all of these laws of capital necessitate the destruction of man and nature. Together we call social nature, where man is subject in the relationship. So we have, and moreover, if it takes the destruction of the South, the life in the South, to create the profit in the North, then there is a class in the North, and again, the class is not, in the North is a class formation. It's not a geographic something. There's a class in the North that consumes the life of the South. It's not just that I am, taking something from the South, because if I need to extract my my primary resources from the south, I'm going to extract life first. So the idea, profits are not going to come from the extraction of oil or copper or zinc or whatever. They're going to come from the extraction of life, because what the extraction of life is going to do, it's going to disempower the people that are going to negotiate the price of what I am taking from them. So the extraction of life is profit. Again, destruction is the extraction of life, and so on, is profit. So there is a class that has no potential for revolution in the North. It is an army of labor, of capital. It's an army. So there is a section of people who work in the North, who are not working class, who do not, they work, but capital is not just an idea. A person in an army, a general or a captain or someone like that, he's a worker, but he works to produce death and consumes the death, because the death produces profits and produces goods and produces things that he consumes, a luxury lifestyle. So it's a cannibalistic order as well. The cannibalism is taking, is there. I mean, it's not just we are all dying. No, some are dying faster than others. It's true that the whole planet is going to sink, but some are dying faster than others, and that is because there are people who work with no revolutionary potential. What do I mean by revolutionary potential? I mean there are people whose incomes and whose lifestyle rises with imperialist wars of aggression, with more hunger and disease and indebtedness to Africa and to the Arab world and things of this nature, and to Latin America, of course. So there is this process that kicks in, and it is basically at this very moment in time, we kind of think it is not unstoppable, and indeed it is. It is to a great extent because of the ideological crisis of alternative ideology. There is no alternative socialist ideology dominant enough to counter the weight of history. And that is the reason it's because these very facts, what I have just redetailed, that the rate of destruction is the rate of profit, and there is a cannibalistic class in the North that doesn't have a revolutionary potential. That is, I have a revolutionary potential if I live in the South and I'm aggressed by the armies of the North. In order to live better, I must fight the armies of the North. But the armies of the North are the body mass of capital. They get they don't earn wages. They share in the loot of imperialism. They share in the loot of imperialist profiteering. And that's how capitalism started, actually. That's how, when production relations changed, and that's how capitalism started. So we have a system that is going towards an abyss in a definitive way, and yet the colonization of the mind, of the global mind, because of its power to control the production of knowledge and to marionette the way people live through the new means of technology and so on, social media and what have you. All of this is now making it harder for a rupture in ways and methods of thought to put an end to this process. There is a lack of revolutionary, paucity of revolutionary organization, a paucity of revolutionary thought. And when there is when there are such penuries in organization and revolutionary thought, you'd expect that the situation would continue. I mean, we can take one example: the Gaza genocide, right? I mean, the Gaza genocide is a film genocide, with 90% of the Israeli societies agreeing with the, with the killing that is occurring, killing of children and killing of genocide involves this. And yet you have European states and European populations altogether, the majority, of course, saying that this is, we must support the state of Israel and so on. So you have, and that is what I mean, people who work but who do not have a revolutionary potential. They're not wrong in this, in a sense. In an arithmetic way, they're not wrong. They make money out of it. And they make a lot of money out of it. And of course, people think that when the United States spends money on war, it's incurring a cost. It's not incurring a cost. Every debit is a credit. Somebody paid it here, somebody must have earned it there. And whoever earned it there are the class who share in the loot of imperialist strengths, who are doing, what needs to be done. So the biggest crisis we face is not really the crisis of the environment. It's not really the social crisis. It is the crisis of the mind and the crisis of revolutionary organizations. We have people that don't see reality like I have explained it, like as it is, a reality that is headed fast towards an abyss. And it's very difficult to see a way out, unless, of course, there is a commitment by that surpasses national boundaries and the ideas of nationalism and the ideas of race and so on. These imposed, these weaponized identities of capital that divide the working class across the globe, in order to set things straight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kadri. That was really insightful talk, very interesting. I think we have already received some questions, but for a few minutes, I will let you have a bit of rest. I will do a few announcements for our students before we go into the Q&A. Because since it's our first lecture, there are people who joined new in the last week. So we will take attendance for those who want to get credits for the course. For the attendance, we have already published a quiz. It will open 15 minutes in 15 minutes, and it's really easy. You enter there and you answer 2 questions about the lecture. It's about what you learned from the lecture in 1 sentence, and and another question about the presentation. So what was the most interesting idea or insight? You can add an insight or an idea from the main lecture or the questions that your peers will ask. And I'll also add a comment to the chat, which will be our security question to take the attendance. One additional thing is next week we don't have a lecture because next week is TUM Sustainability Day and no lecture is allowed after 12. As the Environmental Department of Student Council at TUM, we will all be there in the TUM Sustainability Day, and we would be very happy if you also come and visit us there and we can talk about our current projects. Thank you so much. I think I can start with the Q&A questions that are already posted and has no names. So we have 2 anonymous questions. Maybe I can start with them, and then you can ask your questions by opening your microphone, and if you want your cameras, yeah. So the first question was asked 22 minutes ago. The student asks, what's the connection between the argument of dual use and the benefits of war in production and capitalism? Do you think this would still stand in a non-capitalistic society? And why are we not accelerating production enough based on nature's threats, protection against natural catastrophes, but we do for human attacks?
Well, I mean, we have a social metabolic order that reproduces. We have a society that reproduces itself by work. And when we work, we use inputs and we produce outputs and we consume these outputs. When in a capitalist society, it is the profit rate, and that governs the production process. And the profit rate says, I need to sell, I don't care what the commodity is going to do to the rest of the people, right? If I pollute 10 times more than necessary than this, and I make people pay for the pollution, I'm cutting costs. They handle the cost, they handle the diseases, they handle whatever, and so on, because in the end, I'm competing with another pen maker in order to sell my pen at a lower price to stay in the market and so on. And this is an ontological law. This is a law of being, under capitalism. Something that we don't do. It doesn't matter if somebody is black or white. This is what happens to everybody. Is a question. Their livelihood depends on how these competing guys are going to destroy everybody down the line. And in a socialist, and so what have they done? What have the capitalists done? They have taken so much from society. They have taken labor and resources, converted it into money, and kept it for themselves. Right? This is what they've done. They kept it for themselves in profits. Because they govern everything, they control everything. In a socialist society, if I take labor and I take hours of labor from labor and I take trees from the forest from labor or something like that, I must put back into society and nature what I have taken out of society and nature to respect the inertia of development, to respect an equilibrium that reproduces society in a healthy state time and again. So I want a social reproduction order that is sane, that gives back to people and nature what it has taken out of people and nature, because my criteria is not profit. My criteria is the well-being of everybody, environmental well-being and social well-being. And these are the laws of the different. Now, if you say capitalism does not do this, and socialism does not do that, we have examples. We know that we live in a world that is governed by the capitalist laws. And where is the world going in 50 years' time? Or is it now? It's already too bad, probably irreparable. I don't know, but I mean, it looks pretty bad. It's terrible. So if the capitalist laws of development condition the development of the world, we know it's horrific. It's not horrific. It will end everything, it seems, right? Well, I mean, things will be very shabby, not end altogether, but will be very shabby. On the other hand, if we look at socialist system, if we look at China, which it says, I'm slightly socialist, not fully socialist, right? It doesn't say, but if you look at China, it has grown by alleviating poverty, by bettering nature. And if you look, and so there is a possibility that a socialist system can do better. And we have examples of that. At least the criteria for development under socialism and capitalism are quite different. Put back into society what you've taken out of society is the order of socialism. Take out of society, never put back anything into society is the order of capitalism. And so, at least logically, we know it's better, socialism, and historically, it has proven to be better.
Thank you so much for the answer. I'll also read another anonymous question, and then we can move on to our students who are already in the session. So would you say that within capitalist wars, the goal is most about actually killing people to cut costs and less about territorial expansion? What about wars on countries that are completely self-sustaining?
I didn't get that. Sorry. Wars on countries?
Yeah, I can repeat the last part or the whole question.
Maybe repeat the whole thing.
Yeah. So would you say that within capitalist wars, the goal is most about actually killing people to cut costs and less about territorial expansion? What about wars on countries that are completely self-sustaining?
I mean, there is the idea, I mean, we deal with things ontologically here, territorial expansion, because in the end, a territory is a thing. It's not a reason for war. And I mean, we're speaking at a meta level here. What at a realistic level, what do wars do? I mean, even if you have territorial control, you are from the expansion of the territory, you are competing with someone else for resources over that territory. If there are resources in that territory, you are destroying man to get the resources. So in the end, without the, because some people have some wars in the background of their minds, is it, what about this war and that war? Is it territorial? There is no such, any war is a war of territorial expansion, it seems. The important thing is not that. The important thing is what is happening to man and nature as inputs into profit making. That's the important thing, because in the end, somebody is going to take the money and go and run with it to the bank. Somebody has bought T-bills to pay for the weapons, has cash that is not going anywhere, that has been securitized in T-bills. This is what the war at rock bottom is about. Any war for resources is a war for territorial expansion as well. You can call it whatever, but it will be in the end about cutting the life of man and that, yeah. And it's an industry. It's an industry in its own right. If you give a guy a machine and tell him to make a pen, he will make a pen. If you give him a machine like a tank and tell him to kill, he will kill. And this pen has a price, and the death of a man has a price. Because these things, are so obvious that people don't even see sometimes for some reason. I don't know why. How? Because not simply. Well, in the United States, when they were genociding the native population, there was a point where I've seen it in a movie, but then I've read about it when I was young. I've seen it in a movie that there is something called scalping. Like if you take the scalp of a Native American, you get $1 for it, and I think President Jackson or someone like that was paid $1. Sick. Anyways.
Yeah, thank you. I've also read about the scalping, so yeah, you remember it right? I think, yeah.
It's I think I remember the name of the author she wrote about. I read it. I can't recall it now, but I'll remember.
Yeah, thank you. Another question is from student named Sama Abdul Rahman. Sama, if you want to ask your question, you can also do it by opening your microphone, but if not, I can read it. Okay. So Sama asks, how do you think this effect of distraction will manifest in the light of AI? For example, using AI for labor will push wages massively down. AI is very energy and resource intensive, and so on. Will distraction be even more efficient, or maybe it even reverses that effect?
Again, always think. Again, it's methods of reasoning have been corrupted everywhere. Methods of reasoning are what gives us a leeway, a roadway towards some relative truth of some sort. Machines don't exist alone. They have a subject. The subject of machine is history, is social relations. AI is a machine. In the hands of us, if we were to better nature with it and to better our conditions of mankind, it will be. But in the hands of capital, it's going to be a killing tool because it makes profits out of killing, literally. So it will be a more efficient killing tool. That's what it will be. If you recall Karl Marx talking about the printing press, and Gutenberg, I think, were somewhere, I forgot. But it is, the point is, it was supposed to produce knowledge, but it printed the wrong books and produced dogma and literacy, rather. The people who can read, but read the wrong things.
Thank you. I will read one more question from an anonymous student again. Given historical examples where traditional systems became authoritarian, how can a modern revolutionary society avoid repeating this while trying to move beyond capitalism?
Again, the idea of these people draw on verbatim on what exists in the store of knowledge that capital has provided. People draw from, and the store of knowledge of what exists out there is a distorted store of knowledge. It's distorted vocabulary. What is there a class system without authoritarianism? It's impossible. Is there a class system without bureaucracy? It is impossible. It is the erosion of the class system is the erosion of authority. The more classes, working classes, are divided globally on for whatever reason, for whatever identity, the more capital gains in power. The more capital gains in power, the more it gains in wealth. Because capital does not think, I need to cut costs, I'm going to pay less. It thinks that if I am more powerful because I kill the other, that's called the primacy of politics. Capital is not stupid. It hasn't lived that long until now. If I can kill the other and I can be a master of all things, I can get all the money I want at any price, anything I want, at any price I want. I can get slaves, and I can get things cheap, and I can pollute nature and make society pay for nature. That's what capital does. It needs to make profits, and it's impersonal. It's not one God. History is impersonal, and history runs things. We are born into a set of institutions and ideas that run things. Authoritarianism is always there in any class society. The idea is to erode class society, you erode class differences, you erode, and that's through interworking class solidarity, the erosion of identity barriers against the capital class that destroys mankind and nature. And that's how but you're gonna have authority in a system that turns socialist. Like a small country now, Cuba, it's turning social. It has a socialist, and it's facing the ugliest form of capitalism in the pedophile era of Trump, right? How is that system going to be able to fight when there's so much money being poured into a starving population to turn it against the regime? They're being starved and given dollars, and that's what happens everywhere. So it's very difficult to be unauthoritarian in the face of an authoritarian system. You need authority. You need to basically galvanize and strengthen your home front, and you're going to have prisons. You need to have prisons. It's impossible. You need to have authority. And the worst form of authoritarianism is the white working class authoritarianism, the white working class which says I can vote for Republicans or Democrats day in and day out, and they can massacre the developing world. That sort of consensus, that mind consensus, that the idea that you've cloned so many minds to think of the others as worthy of death, is the worst form of authoritarianism. They are democratic in the sense that they can manage do this and vote at home. Voting is not democracy. Setting the mind to vote one way or the other is the democratic process. Setting the mind to be different by knowing the facts and acting on the conditions is what the democratic process is. Creating the same mind in everybody and making them That's not democracy. That's the worst form of authority. There is more fascism in some European states now than in the 1930s.
Thank you. I think we have more questions from the students, but I want to give the floor to students who want to ask the question themselves first, and then I can move on with the questions that are already written here. So if you want, yeah, I think Andriani, yeah. Are you able to? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I am. Thank you so much, Professor Kadri, for the lecture. It's really refreshing to hearing you, and it's also refreshing to hear that in a lecture at the Technical University of Munich. To be honest, I think there are words that need to be spoken also about the university accountability. What I would like to ask you is, what is your take in regards to kind of personal burden and relief within the system that we're functioning? You briefly mentioned that, for example, recycling is in vain, or any other kind of action that we might be doing is in vain. And in a system perspective, I understand why it is in vain. But on a personal level, at the same time, when you don't have a lot of power to do a lot of things, to feel like you're contributing to some extent, other than, I don't know, joining a demonstration, what else is there to do? Like, don't you think that also small actions such as recycling could kind of soothe the burden of being a privileged citizen?
No, I mean, I don't have I have a roadmap to how things should be done, right? But what I know is this is how things are. I mean, I haven't theorized. As I said, no, look, if you tell everybody you're in a system where the rate of destruction is equal to the rate of profit, this is literally what the law of value is, what the law of profit is. And that's an observation from fact. We know that there is a huge destruction, and that's because a law of history, a law of capital has been operating. We will all been subject to that law. And yet nobody knows that. Before we adopt a relation to the fact, or an agency to the fact, or a policy to the fact, whatever, we must know what the fact is.
Right.
If we have a one-sided view of reality, that and we reify the nation state, we say Germany, for instance, or we say, value and nature don't have boundaries. There's no such thing as identity in trees, or mankind, in fact, because when you consider mankind as nature, of course, but yet, the power of fascism in the minds of, it isn't fascism, obviously, right? Is that when you say, I am different for some reason, at this level, we are not different. There's no one that is different. Nature is not different. We are not different from nature. It's a question of survivability in a system that acts by auto-destruction, that is, auto-destructing. And that's pretty, I think, obvious. So first, if we get the picture of things right, then we must get the strategy right. But the point is, there is a production of knowledge and imagery that is being projected onto the mind, which is a false imagery. If I think, now, how many people know that we have obviously produced much more dirt and death and pollutants than good things? How many people know this around the world? That is a certitude, because we know that in 50 years' time, whatever, there's something of this nature. If we pursue the same line of reasoning, and if you pour money into the system, like COP28 or something like that, the money recirculates to feed the same process. If you say, I'm going to recycle, then you pour money into the system to recycle, the money is going to turn into higher profits, and profits are found in the deadening of the system. Profits don't come from the very act of destroying the power of a human being, the power to negotiate, the power to be a spirit. And that comes from the death of the human, the death of society. A dead society does not negotiate prices. And all these terribly, terribly obvious facts are missing. Now, when these facts are known, let all the agencies of the mainstream come out and say things in this way. then let them find a solution. What would the solution be? An end to the capital relationship. It is impossible to adhere to the capital relationship and survive. It's just not a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can move to the next
Nennen wir sie
question.
einfach Justiz, wir müssen es nicht komplizierter machen, als es ist. Das
Yeah.
Hello? Yes. So earlier you brought the example of China, a socialist country that in some way maybe has a better system, if I understood correctly.
That's
But
right.
I'd be interested to hear maybe if you could elaborate on that, because I'm not sure if I'd agree with you that the modernization of China is in any way better than some other capitalist countries.
That's all right. I understand that you agree. Yes. Well, it is. I mean, China does not aggress other country like NATO does. And it doesn't have an army stationed abroad to destroy other people like NATO does. And so in that sense, it's better. Yes. What's the next question?
So I would have two questions. Firstly is, so are you I don't know how to say, are you a fan, or what do you think about the idea of the concept of degrowth, so economic degrowth? And secondly, do you think something like degrowth or overcoming capitalism is possible in a reformeric way, or only through revolution?
No, I mean, I'm not calling for a revolution or anything like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't call for revolutions. People, revolutions occur by themselves all the time. It's not because I call for a revolution that there's going to be a revolution or something like this. Did you say that I called for a revolution? I don't recall saying
no,
that.
I did not.
Okay.
I asked if you think that the overcoming capitalism is possible just through politics and reformeric way.
Well, there is between reform and revolution could be twained to work in consortium to arrive at a result where you have an end to a system that is autophagic, that is eats upon itself, consumes itself. But reform can also be a blanket statement that covers that says, I can have, the fascist idea of German small business and small banks that make Germany live better off and things like that, and a welfare state in Germany and all these things, which are, sort of quite from the days of, what's his name? I forgot his name anyways. Germany is not outside of the constellation of power of the Western Hemisphere, and it's a constellation of power that draws profits and rents. The profits and rents are not going to come from machines or from anything. They're going to come from the fact that you have a gun, and you have good guns and big guns that could kill everybody around the world, and you can impose your ideas on them, and that's how things work. And so if you can have a reform process along the degrowth, but whose end is to basically eliminate the laws of profit and the law of value, and on a global scale, then that's okay. I mean, if things could work this way, but it's that's a historical contingency. No one knows how things will work. But degrowth alone is not unless, of course, it takes into account the fact that there are societies that have to modernize in the developing world, that have to have growth for sometimes in order to feed their populations and to better their standards of living and so on, and catch up. That's an important thing to keep in mind. But healthy growth is better than degrowth. Healthy growth is better growth in the environment, a different measure of growth. Because what degrowth says is I'm going to reduce the growth rates, and the growth rate is measured in profit terms, and profit terms are based on the national systems of accounts, and the national systems of accounts, and the time of the national system of accounts, and the monies of the national systems of accounts are imposed by capital. They're symbols of capital. They're the time of capital, the space of capital, the ideas of capital. They are there to mislead. They are fetishes that conceal reality. They are there to mislead. The point is to find our own social criteria of what is healthy growth. Where do we need to have growth? And on a global scale, how is that possible? To put back into society and the environment what has been taken out of society and the environment at a higher rate is the healthy growth that we need. Why not have healthy growth rather than the growth that says I need to destroy in order to grow? So if I'm going to have less growth, I'm going to have less destruction. But destruction remains there. And if you have, and how are you going to be able to complete the process if you don't have a class in power that is going to basically imprison the people who abuse nature and man?
Thank you so much. So our class time is at end. So if people want to leave, they can. But if Dr. Kadri wants to receive some more questions, I can read them. We have received a few more questions, so it's up to you. I know it can be a bit tiring.
Maybe one more question if you don't.
Yeah. So I'm going to the Q&A. One question from Sarah. She says, I don't think I fully understood the part about the lack of revolutionary potential in the West. I stumbled a bit over your understanding of class. Class is determined by wage dependence, not by the type of work, right? Could you explain again exactly who you meant by that? Don't we just need more class consciousness? Or is it the point that class affiliation doesn't automatically mean that people are also conscious of their class? And if so, what does that imply? A bit long question.
Well, that's an excellent question. That's a very good question indeed. It's a question that, first of all, there are, many ways you can cut corners in order to define a social class. If we cut corners, if we are parsimonious in the way we define things, a class is what we do to reproduce ourselves. If we are workers, peasants, we work the land, we are a peasant class. If we are industrial workers, we are an industrial working class. And that's what we do to reproduce ourselves. And we do that in relations to between us and to other classes. So we are defined, the class is defined in relation to itself and in relation to other classes and in relation to its to the means of production, to the ownership of the means of production and so forth. So, but to be sort of thrifty in the way we define class, I'd say that it's what we do to survive. That's a class. So a class exists everywhere. There are classes everywhere. What people do to survive, what the group of people does to survive is a class. Society as a whole mainly works for a wage to survive. That's a class. It's so the working class, we call that. Now, so what does it do to survive? What does a class do to survive? I work the land and I produce lettuces or cabbages or something like that, and somebody takes them from me or something. This is the easier part. Takes them from me. So I end up, if I want more for my lettuce, for my cabbages, I must, say, look, I want more. I'm going to protest, and I'm going to go on strike. And if it's a country that's losing its resources and labor, it's going to basically start a national liberation movement and say, I want more for myself, to eat more, basically. So a class becomes something that, it's not an idea in the head. It's an idea of actually what exists out there. It's an objective condition. Now, this class that actually survives and better reproduces itself by making gains by fighting against capital, that's a class that better reproduces itself time and again because of its class power and class consciousness. It has developed a consciousness that is for itself, that says, look, I am going to be better that way. Now, consciousness is a very difficult issue to deal with, but I'm going to skip that because that's another lecture altogether. But then we have the issue of a class without revolutionary potential, a class that is a rentier class, like the Western Hemisphere classes, the ones that make things. They make things out of the destruction of the rest of the world. They have better technology out of the destruction of the rest of the world. So their potential is to destroy more. So they revolt not to basically, but in the north, they don't go on strike to basically get a better wage. Most of the time, decisively, that is, necessarily, but not exclusively, it's sharing in the imperial rents, in the product of a history of genocides and destruction that has done this. And so that class is, the potential of that class is war, and more nationalism. Thank you for this lovely attendance.
Thank you, Dr. Kadri. Thank you for also answering the questions. Thank you for the great lecture. I think we are receiving some more questions, but I know you're already tired, and it's late. I think we can end the session. Thank you also, Mika, for inviting Dr. Kadri and creating the communication between us.
Sure.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
In a minute, I will end the session completely. Yeah.